Good evening. This is the first meeting of the Grafton Planning Board in the year 2022, certainly not the last. And we'll begin the meeting with the usual sort of announcement pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. This meeting of the Grafton Planning Board is being conducted with remote participation by board members and members of the public. Remote participation by the public for the public comment agenda item, public hearings, and any other matter for which the board allows public participation will be via the Zoom raise hand feature. If you raise your hand on Zoom, you will be enabled at an appropriate point to enter the meeting via voice or video to make a comment or ask a question. And when you do so, please identify yourself by name and address for the record. And because we are all remote this evening, every vote will be taken by roll call. And I will begin by calling a roll of the board members. Mr. Hassinger.
I'm here.
Ms. Hassinger.
Here.
Mr. Wood.
Here.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Here.
And Associate Member Ms. McCormick. And Mr. Robbins is present.
Did you hear from her?
I heard something.
Yeah.
Maura, are you present?
She may want to just leave and rejoin, and sometimes that fixes the audio.
Yeah, I saw her mic switch on and off, but
She raised her hand to say she is present.
All righty. So, moving into our agenda, the first agenda item is public input. If there is any member of the public present this evening who wishes to speak to an issue that is not already on the board's agenda, then now would be the time to make your wishes known. I do not, in fact, see anybody on the attendee list. I don't see any hands raised from the panelists. I will presume that there is, at this point, no public input to be received. Moving on then to action items. Our first action item is the continuation of the discussion about the determination of minor modification at 104 Creeper Hill Road. As I recall, we were anticipating two items, according to my notes from our last discussion. One was some documentation of support from the abutters on Sargent Island, and the other was drainage calculations to be provided either on the plan or as an associated document. Do we have any update on that?
I can go if you like. My name is Brian Nelson from Metro West Engineering. I was at your last meeting on December 13th, and so we did basically make a quick revision to the plan to put some infiltration calculations on sheet 1 of the site plan set. Those are up top right-hand corner of the page. And I believe the applicant had submitted letters from the abutters on Sargent Island just north of the property as well. So I believe those have been submitted in fairly short order after that initial meeting.
All right, Chris, do we have those in hand? Because I don't think I saw them on the board's website for meeting materials.
I did.
Yeah, we did receive those. So
they're in there as part of the document set for this project.
All right, I guess I didn't look through that document very carefully to sort of assume that the materials had been submitted as discussed. So with that, I think our thinking was that with those additions to the documentation, the board might be willing to deem this a minor modification. Is there any other discussion? Any other thoughts?
I move that we find this modification as minor and direct staff to issue appropriate documentation.
If I could have made out what you said, I'd second it. You were breaking up as you were talking.
All right.
Here.
I move that we find the modification minor in nature and direct staff to issue the appropriate documentation.
COVID's really bad.
You're still breaking up, or COVID is worse than. Anyway, so yeah, second.
All right, moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. We'll put it to a roll call vote. Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
and Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. Staff will issue the necessary follow-up documentation and we'll consider this matter completed.
Thank you very much for your time. Have a good night.
Thank you. All righty, moving on to our next action item, we have a draft decision on the preliminary plan approval at 340 and 348 Providence Road. Staff had circulated the draft decision to the board toward the end of last week. It's as a preliminary plan approval. This one looks pretty straightforward. I note that the draft decision talks about in the definitive plan responding to the various comments from other boards, fire and so on. Any discussion of this draft decision? And I guess if everybody's comfortable with it, perhaps a motion would be in order.
That we approve the decision as drafted with any favorable decisions.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All righty, moved and seconded. Is there any discussion of the motion? Hearing none, we'll put this to a vote. Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
and Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. The staff will issue the paperwork reflecting the board's vote. And our next item on the agenda is moving into discussion items. The first one is for the board to review the responsibilities proposed for the board for the open space and recreation plan action items. Any comments or thoughts on what the committee has proposed? Again, just as a refresher, the committee proposed for one set of action items that the board be the lead responsible party, and for another set that the board play a supporting role. Most of those, it seemed to make sense to the committee as the committee was setting this up. And of course, the committee is interested in whether the board is comfortable with what's been proposed or the board has any suggestions. I will note that in at least one or two cases, the board has already accomplished the action item.
My only comment reading through this is there's definitely some that no one is identified as lead, but both us and select board are identified as partners on it. That I could foresee one or both of our boards starting to take a run at this without realizing the others doing the same.
Yeah,
thing.
if I'm not mistaken, we made sure that every single item had one board designated as lead, although the presentation in this document might possibly be less than completely clear on that.
You know, one example of me looking at this was page 5 of the document. The 6.4-D. That was just one example of me seeing it on page 5. Unless I'm totally misunderstanding how this was laid out. I think I was, now that I'm rereading this.
The asterisks are next to conservation or whatever. That's supposed to, who's supposed to lead it? Over in the third from the last column where the cursor is there.
Yes, the asterisk designate the one that's intended to be the lead agency.
And I just realized where I was getting confused. I missed the fact that each section had a heading at the top of the table. So that was, well, I thought I was reading things more than once.
Yeah.
I read the whole document.
I couldn't hear that, Justin.
Yeah, you're breaking up, Justin. I don't know why.
I don't know why either.
Oops, now that was good.
We can just move on from what I said.
Yeah, just as a reference, I just pulled up that page 5, and that in that table, conservation is the lead agency, and select board and planning are both supporting. So yeah, that's more of just the presentation of in the document is perhaps less than ideal.
Who oversees that all of this is happening?
Well, that's always the interesting question. Is is there actually a mechanism to ensure that all this happens? And the answer is really no. The intent is that the Open Space and Recreation Committee that put this together is sort of playing a monitoring role. That is, we have proposed, for example, the planning board as the lead agency on a number of items, and the committee will be asking the respective lead boards at least annually for a report as of all these things that have been assigned to you, what have you done? But there's no mechanism to, require things to be done, in the sense that if you don't do them, something bad happens. Well, there's no practical way.
I'm starting with reminding boards that it's something that should be on their plate, because it's real easy. We'll see this with the master plan too.
Yes.
It's really easy to focus on, the people banging on your front door instead of stuff we talked about 3 years ago.
Yep. So I think our hope is with this, and yes, as I got into this with the Open Space and Recreation Committee, I'm thinking also about thinking ahead to the master plan, where we will be looking at something similar. Now, the master plan is going to make a series of recommendations or recommended actions or whatever we end up calling them. And the question is, how do we keep them sufficiently, at the front of people's minds, or at the front of the board's respective board's attention, to have at least some hope of actually seeing some of these things through to completion.
Okay, well, I'll move that we give whatever approval is appropriate.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, let's say that the board has reviewed the action items assigned to it as either a lead or supporting role, and the board concurs with what the Open Space and Recreation Committee proposes.
That's
kind of what the committee is looking for. Does the board concur with the committee's proposal?
My motion.
Second.
Okay. Is there a second?
He did.
Ah, too busy talking myself to hear other people talking. Okay, moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll put this one to a vote. Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
And
Planning.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. So the board's action here will be communicated back to the committee, the Open Space and Recreation Committee, which is scheduled to meet next week. And looking for feedback from this board and other boards, and we will proceed from there. All righty, good enough.
Okay, call me back in about an hour.
No, they can hear it.
Our next discussion item
Okay.
is
Talk to you in an hour. Bye-bye. Sorry.
Mill Redevelopment Overlay District. Do we have anything new on Mill Redevelopment Overlay?
So I don't have an update currently on that, so we can move to the next item, but I am working with CMRPC and we will we'll have some updated language for the board to review and possibly targeting spring town meeting for some of those updates.
Oh, okay. Sounds good. Our last discussion item is the master plan update. We have in front of us a draft request for proposals. I believe Chris plans to send that out midweek this week in hopes of getting some consultants to respond with a proposal for getting the work going. So if you checked the website late this afternoon, you'll see that I had proposed a slight update to the draft RFP. Aside from some wordsmithing, the main point I wanted to add was to include early in phase 2 the preparation of a what did I call it? A community engagement plan to try to put some emphasis on outreach to populations and groups. In the words there, populations and groups that are typically underrepresented in the planning process, kind of flesh out a little bit the language that Chris had put in there initially to, I forget what the word is, diverse and inclusive. But to put a little bit of meat on that, specifically to my suggestion was to have an explicit community engagement plan developed at kind of the start of the public engagement process, rather than just leaving it up to what we typically do for community engagement, which is some advertising, a survey that we put out there. And but I'd like to go a little bit beyond that, and I'm hoping that we get consultants who have some experience in some serious community engagement of this sort. So anybody else on the board have any thoughts about the draft RFP?
I had one.
Prabhu?
Do we have a list of all the stakeholders? When I say stakeholders, the other committees, the boards and stuff. Generally, I would prefer to see that as these are the other involved players. When planning department is going to drive this, what are the other groups, departments, boards, committees who would be part of this process?
Yeah, Chris.
So, so part of that will be the, I didn't put that in the RFP, but that'll be part of that initial phase is working with the consultant to identify those. Certainly it'll be the planning board, the select board will be part of the stakeholders. We'll probably try to look for a point person from the select board. We'll reach out to, all the other kind of boards and committees, as well as, staff will probably have representatives as stakeholders. And then we'll try to reach out to kind of local champions and, some local businesses that are active and to find those. But that'll be part of that initial process is identifying those. And so the language that Chairman Robbins included of the engagement plan, I think that was really good to bolster that. And that'll be part of part of that community engagement plan is identifying those groups and who those kind of community champions will be.
Is any
Yeah, that's-
action required from us?
Sorry?
Is any action required from us?
Just any feedback. I'd like to publish this. I think I put it on the 12th. So unless there's any kind of changes that the board would like to see, I'd like to just move ahead with it and get kind of at least a nod of approval, but we don't need a formal vote.
Make it so.
I liked it as it was, and then I liked it even more after David's changes. So this is good.
Yep, I think there's, once we dig into the community engagement piece of this, I think there's going to be a fair amount of work to flesh that out and try the best we can to really get the sort of community engagement I'd like to see. It's always experience with past plans and activities of this nature. It's not easy to get the public engaged, but rather than try to figure that all out as part of the RFP, I got the idea actually from looking at a similar process taking place in another town that one of the things they said, I liked the idea of just actually working with the consultant to develop a plan for community engagement. So we're not, as we write the RFP, we're not trying to predict exactly how we're going to do that. And I think the same goes. Prabhu, I had the same question you had at first when I first read through this about the stakeholders, and I realized that number one, the RFP as proposed, included as an early phase 2, it included getting together with the board and the consultant and other boards to identify the stakeholders. And of course, the term stakeholder itself, it could be ambiguous or could be interpreted narrowly or broadly. So we'll work all that out once we get to work with a consultant. We'll work out. I know from past history that the comprehensive plan, when we did that 20 years ago, it involved a fairly substantial number of town boards and committees and the general public. So, like I said, we'll work out. I'm satisfied with the idea of working out all the details as part of the process, rather than trying to spell a lot of that out in the RFP. So if the board's comfortable with the draft RFP, revised draft RFP, then informally we give Chris the go ahead to put it out there and hopefully get some great consultants to respond to us. All right, with that, we can move on to some general business. We have some bills.
Will we approve them?
Second.
Moved and seconded that we approve the bills. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
And Mr. Robbins votes aye. Minutes of previous meetings. I don't think we had any.
December 13th.
Why did I completely overlook that? Yeah, no.
Added late.
Oh yeah, it was added since the last time I looked at it, which was like, I thought it was like 6 o'clock. Maybe I didn't just notice that.
Dave,
So,
let's have a rule that email gets sent to all of us anytime something is posted on Monday.
that would probably be helpful.
It would certainly be helpful.
Okay, so obviously I haven't had a chance to look at the minutes of December 13th. Anybody who has looked at it, any comments?
Defer to the next meeting. I don't think any of us saw it.
Okay, that works for me. And then staff report. Do you have a lot for staff report, Chris?
I think I can take up about 5 minutes. So
About all time we have.
If we could squeeze in D also, then we'd be in good shape.
Yes.
Yeah. I do have a couple items. So the local rapid recovery plan, we're still working through that, and part of that process is we did coordinate with DHCD and their process, looking at the two projects that we chose and the funding guidance report. So we did receive that back, and I met with them this morning to kind of go over that document and get some additional feedback on the program. What I'll be doing is I'll be circulating that that guidance report shortly. We can discuss it at our next meeting, but it really was a good feedback, outlines different funding opportunities for those two projects, about 5 different opportunities for each project, and kind of goes over, you know, some are more difficult to achieve, some are easier to manage, and has a lot of background on those, and looked at a lot of different pools other than kind of the usual suspects and usual grant opportunities. Got really creative. So I'll circulate that around and we can discuss that at our next meeting. Also upcoming, we did, you know, back in December, we did receive updated guidelines on the MBTA community zoning, which is looking at around MBTA communities, developing zoning to address housing and mixed use development in those areas. I'm putting together an analysis, which I'll circulate to the planning board and the select board for their comments. We have until March to submit comments back to the state on those, on the final legislation. There's some initial comments, I think, that we can provide, but I'll outline those in the memo in terms of, you know, how that would fit in the context of Grafton. I think there's some challenges and also some opportunities to meet that. There is a webinar that's being hosted on January 12th. I'll be in attendance for that. I can circulate the link if people are interested, but that's a kind of a presentation and fact-finding webinar on that item.
Yep, I'd seen the link for that, Chris, and I was tentatively planning on sitting in on it.
Excellent, thank you. And then the CMRPC quarterly meeting is coming up with their visioning session. So that's another meeting that if you have time to attend, you know, I think that visioning session is really important, you know, setting the agenda for CMRPC for the next, I think it's the 10-year time frame. Again, I'll plan to be in attendance, but I always recommend those kinds of things. And then finally, we do have the Barassi appeal. There was an update on that. So we do have to schedule an executive session to discuss our next, and then we'll also have to have a public hearing on that. We're looking at February. We'll have the executive session on our meeting on the 24th, January 24th. But February, looking at that schedule, it was noticed that we have February 14th, which is a very special day, as our meeting. So I didn't know if the board wanted to have a February 7th meeting instead, that we can schedule rather than the February 14th meeting. Although we do important work, I don't think it's that romantic. So, but I'll defer to the board on that.
Yep, I would not be opposed to February 7th. That would be 2 weeks after the January 24th meeting. So it's not like it's meetings in 2 consecutive weeks, which we occasionally do when necessary.
Second.
We need a vote to change. Yeah, I think we do need a vote to change the meeting date. So moved.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded that we change our February 14th meeting to February 7th. Is there any discussion of the motion? Just to be clear, this is not adding an additional meeting. It's simply moving the meeting from 1 week to the week prior. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
and Mr. Robbins votes aye. We are officially going to meet on the 7th rather than the 14th. And Chris will follow up as necessary with town council regarding some of the mechanics of that public hearing. The details to be discussed at the executive session at our next meeting. All righty.
There's just one thing under correspondence, and it is an interesting point. I'm not sure that we can solve anything about it, but I think we might be able to ask Chris to dive in and talk to us about it, because they're asking us to do something.
Yeah, so so that letter for correspondence, I did ask, Ms. Danko came to a development team meeting discussing their project. She had submitted an application to the board. I believe it was prior to my coming on, I think it just by a few months, and the board didn't feel that it met the criteria. So she wasn't able to get essentially a mixed use in that neighborhood business in the format that she had wanted. In talking to her at development team meeting, I think there is some validity to those concerns. So I asked her to write a letter to kind of prompt the board, and we can take a look at that zoning, unless the board feels otherwise. But my understanding is that neighborhood business use or that zone may be conducive to some of the mixed use, at least at a small scale, with accessory apartments above the commercial businesses. I think it is in line with some of the findings of our local rapid recovery plan. I think we've seen some very well done mixed use projects that are coming online and that have been in other areas, especially our village mixed use zone. So I think as we kind of move through some of those visioning sessions, the master plan update, that's something that we can kind of start to roll in. But I felt that having that letter to the board and putting it on our radar would be the first step.
Yeah, when I saw that, the first thing I thought of, well, that ties into one of the projects we listed on the local rapid recovery plan, which is to look at the zoning in that New England Village area. And as I think I've probably previously noted off and on that, back when we first started looking at mixed use zoning, we did have in mind that the New England Village area would eventually be a candidate for a mixed use zoning of some form. I think that, so I think, having this on our radar, keeping this on our radar will be helpful. Sort of like I said, ties into the master plan update, ties into the local rapid recovery plan project, wherever we go with that. And sort of, it kind of prompts me to think that, there ought to be an opportunity here to look at that area and come up with a, perhaps some sort of variant of mixed use zoning that's kind of tuned to what the folks in that area would like to do, what the potential opportunities are there, all of which is good for some future discussions. We don't want to punt it off indefinitely, but we've got a couple things going that this ties nicely into.
I gotta say, this is not a new issue. I remember when Peter Lowett, Peter Lowett, our first planner.
I remember Peter.
Yes. I remember him and us talking about there was some issue and we should be looking at some of this and trying to find, blah, 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 on and on. And it comes around and it keeps coming around. So.
Yep.
And there are other businesses in the area that are asking similar questions. So it's something that I'd like to.
Maybe the master plan should tell us what we want there.
That's a thought.
I wonder if I don't think the current master plan says too much.
No, I don't recall that it does have some discussion about that area. Off the top of my head, I don't remember just what. But
now,
anyway.
If we heard the reports We only have one thing left on our agenda.
Yes, I believe. Yes, so just sort of to tie that up, are there any reports from planning board representatives and town committees and CMRPC other than what we may already have heard? Hearing none, we move into the public meetings / hearings portion of our agenda. And just for the benefit of anybody who might happen to be here for the preliminary plan approval at 124 North Street rear, that the applicant has requested a continuation to the next meeting. That would be January 24th. So if you're here for that, the board will at some point take up the applicant's request for a continuation. I don't know if you want to take that. If the board is interested in taking that out of order and dealing with that now, I would not be opposed.
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. The board grant the applicant's written request to continue the hearing at 124 North Street rear to January 24th. Any discussion of the motion? Hearing none, put it to a vote. Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
And Mr. Robbins votes aye. So that having been taken care of, we are now ready to proceed with the discussion of the, so is this actually a public hearing, this the Tufts master plan? Is it a public meeting or a public hearing? I forget.
I believe it is a public hearing.
All righty, so presumably that means we have a legal notice of some sort to read.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay. Let those get read. The legal notice is public hearing notice.
Yeah.
Where's the legal notice?
If there isn't any legal notice,
Yeah, I'm finding a public hearing notice under the
there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. The public hearing for the request filed by the Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine at Tufts University to amend the master plan for the Tufts University Grafton campus scheduled for December 27th, 2021 has been canceled. Instead, the public hearing has been scheduled for January 10th, 2022. Pursuant to section 9.6.1.1 of the Grafton zoning bylaw, the Grafton Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Monday, January 10th, 2022. Good grief, it's already 22. Commencing at 7:30 in Conference Room A of the Grafton Memorial Municipal Center, 30 Providence Road, Grafton, Mass., to consider the request filed by the Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine at Tufts University to amend the previously approved master plan for the Tufts University Grafton campus, located off Westboro Road. The proposed amendment seeks to extend the duration of approval for said master plan through December 28th, 2028, and outlines projected construction on the campus over the next 20 years. The request and plans may be viewed at the Planning Board office in the Municipal Center during regular business hours. This will be a hybrid meeting conducted in person and by remote participation. See grafton.gov.planning board. Okay.
May not be a hybrid meeting.
as it turns out.
Entirely.
No, because they're not allowing meetings in the municipal center. Right?
Yes, at the time the notice was published, it was believed that it would be a hybrid meeting.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I missed that.
All righty, so I guess without further ado, we could get into it. Unless Chris has something that he wants to say to start out with this thing, I would offer Jean the opportunity to proceed into whatever presentation and discussion she has in mind.
Chris, do you have, are you able to share the PowerPoint?
Yep, I can do that. Yeah.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Mr. Chair and members of the board. And I'm hoping my team is all here. Dean Alistair Cribb, Joe McManus, Scott Washburn, Mark Bornstein, who's an attorney from Bowditch and Dewey, and Nick Klubanis and Aaron Prestelio from Sims Maney McKee. So I'm hoping they are able to, actually Dean Cribb will kick it off, I hope.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate your allowing me to speak and tell you about our amended Grafton Master Plan. I'm assuming that you can all hear me okay.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Next slide. I don't think I can control that, right? So I think you all know the history of the Grafton campus, that it came to Tufts University in the late 1970s, but was part of the state psychiatric hospital system for years before that. So it has a lot of beautiful old historic buildings. It's 600 acres of pastoral landscape. And we have refurbished many of the buildings. They're actively being used, and we have, of course, added on new buildings to meet some of the specific functions that we have at the school. Next slide, please. So I'm here representing the team, as Jean Petit said. I am the dean. I've been the dean at Grafton at the veterinary school for 2.5 years. Joe McManus, our Executive Associate Dean, Scott Washburn, our Facilities Director, Jean Petit, the Senior Campus Planner, Mark Bornstein from Bowditch and Dewey, and Nick Kolbanis and Aaron Prestilio from SMMA that have helped put the work together that you will see tonight and you've obviously received in advance. Next slide. So recap what I mentioned before. We have the Foster Hospital for Small Animals, Hospital for Large Animals. We have a wildlife clinic, we have a spay and neuter clinic. And we also have a number of other buildings, which will eventually briefly coming up, that are on our main campus. We also have additional facilities in Woodstock, Connecticut, Walpole, Massachusetts, and Worcester, Massachusetts. And the Grafton Science Park has opportunities for commercial development in it as well. Next slide, please. So we offer educational programs. The heart of our school is the DVM program, but we also have a numbers of master's programs, and we also do quite a few outreach programs in education into the K-12 age group. We also have programs on campus, particularly in the summer when we're not in a pandemic, obviously, for middle school, high school, and college students as well, to introduce them to veterinary medicine and science. We have a number of research buildings on campus where we conduct our research. We are well known for infectious disease and global health research. We have a high biosafety containment facility on the campus. We do a lot of clinical and translational science research, and we do basic research in a number of other areas, including pathology, genomics, neurosciences, heart disease, kidney disease. So we are fairly comprehensive, and we have a number of collaborative research programs with other institutes in the region, UMass in particular. We obviously collaborate with people from Tufts University in Boston. We have collaborations with MIT. And we also have a number of regional companies that rent space and do collaborative work with us on campus. In terms of service, obviously our clinics that I've already mentioned are really important in providing clinical care for the region, and the region extends out beyond our immediate sort of 2-hour radius from here. out into New England, as well as into New York and even Pennsylvania. We had clients come from those areas. We are actively engaged in life sciences, workforce, and economic development for the region, and we have our students engaged in a lot of civic projects and what we call service learning, where they're providing service to people as part of their education. Next slide. So what we are doing, looking forward sort of at least 10 and out to 20 years, is how do we continue to make sure that Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine and all these affiliated programs remain at the forefront of the veterinary colleges in North America and indeed around the world. So we are looking to expand our educational programs and offerings. We'd like to expand the number of students that come to our DVM program and put that up 25% in the short term and up to 50% more than it is now in the longer term. And we want to expand the number of graduate programs that we offer. So all that is going to require new teaching spaces, new classrooms, and larger classrooms. We need to improve and expand our clinical facilities. The demand for our services now outstrips the space that we have. If you put all our clinics together, we provide care for about 125,000 animals a year. Specifically on the Grafton campus, we probably care for about 50,000 animals a year on facilities there, and they are both primary care activities as well as highly specialized clinical care. We want and need to expand our research footprint. So we're doing that now with some repurposing of spaces already in existence, refurbishing of existing labs. But we do need to expand our research footprint, and we are looking at the possibility of a new research building to accommodate the needs that we have. And as we do all these things, we want to, of course, preserve the character of the campus. It's a beautiful campus with beautiful buildings, but we are also very aware of the importance of environmental sustainability. And Tufts University is committed to a net zero by 2050 plan, and we are actively engaged in that, in all the things that we're thinking about doing. And the Grafton Science Park, we continue to see that as an important opportunity for development. And we are actually right now in active discussions over a number of possibilities with the Grafton Science Park. What we're focusing on right now is the educational and research components that are our bread and butter. So next slide, please. So we will outline the physical development program tonight to show you how it helps us to meet those targets we talked about. The campus master plan sort of will give you the large menu items and outline the different priorities, and we've tried to give you a full wish list of what we'd like to see. It's probably not going to all be developed or affordable, but we really wanted to make sure you had a full understanding. Jean, would you like me to pass it back over to you at this point?
Unless you feel like you have momentum, Dean, and want to keep going, because you're doing a wonderful job.
Okay, well, I can keep going, sure, unless anybody wants to get it passed over, but why don't we just go on to the next slide then? So I think I've sort of already addressed this slide with the academic campus, which is really what we're focusing on. So we can go to the next slide here. And so this is the existing campus, and all those blue buildings are the ones that exist. They are not all occupied. There's at least two major buildings on there that are the old historic buildings from the original hospital that have not been refurbished. And certainly one of those, which is sort of the kind of right in the middle of the map, but it's really probably never going to be redone. The cost is just too prohibitive, and of course they're filled with asbestos and all those other things that you'll be familiar with from some of the other developments that are going on. But the blue are what exists now. So next slide. So the existing buildings are about 500,000 square feet, including the basements. And significant part of that is the school administration and clinical, and probably the majority of that space is actually the clinical space. Research and general education, about 150,000. About 85,000 for animal facilities and operational support. And then, of course, I mentioned the vacant buildings already. Next slide. So
this outlines the major projects that we've done in the last 7 years. And obviously the two largest red circles are around our solar arrays. So there's the one on the west side, which is Grafton Science Park Array, and then the one on the east is, we call the Knoll Solar Array because it's near a knoll near our pasture land. A couple of other major projects were the Equine Sports Medicine Center, and that's the square-looking blue building. And to its east is a smaller Shaylin Liu Healing Cage, which is part of our wildlife clinic. And then to the north is, it was actually a substantial, but mostly a renovation and expansion of the lobby area, and really a reconfiguration of the patient flow in our small animal hospital. So those are the projects that, the major projects that we constructed in the last 7 years.
So these are the priorities moving ahead. And so we did expand, as Jean just explained, the lobby and the front area of the Foster Hospital for Small Animals. That's our major specialty hospital, but it needs further expansion and renovation to meet both our teaching needs, our clinical research needs, and our ability to serve the demands of the region. We need to create a new primary healthcare teaching center. And again, I'm sure you've all seen in the newspaper about the demands for veterinarians and the shortages in the veterinary profession. So we are under pressure to increase our class size, which is one of the reasons that we're looking at that. It obviously is also a main way of supporting the school are through our students. So that's another reason for expanding it. But you really need to make sure that those students have access to primary healthcare education, and there is a real demand for urgent care services. So we want to wrap those together to a primary healthcare teaching center. We need to do continual maintenance and upgrading of our clinical and research facilities. We need to expand our research facilities, as I mentioned, and we're looking at the carbon neutral projects. And of course, we want to make sure that we continue to be in compliance with all the necessary district guidelines, criteria, and that are in place. So next slide. So on the left, we're not really going to talk about it very much, is the Grafton Science Park. And those circles show where we want to do the major expansion. And we do not have these absolutely detailed yet, obviously, but these are the main areas. So if you go to the very top of top circle there, that is our main campus learning center. It's called the Low Center. The library's in there. And we want to expand that to accommodate increased graduate programs. The center circle just below there is an expansion of the hospital, but it's actually on the ground floor, so it'll be level with the existing parking lot if you've been through the campus. It's where we need to put new classrooms and expanded student support space, primarily for the DVM program. The next level up, then it becomes level with the main hospital, and we can expand the hospital in that direction. And then on top of that, we need to put additional faculty offices. We've got faculty in, well, basically we're out of offices and we have faculty in inadequate office space. So that's the major expansion to support the clinical and teaching expansion. To the right, where there's the pink building with the yellow there is where we want to put the primary healthcare education center. And then the left circle is a new research building to support expanded research activities. I'm going to turn this last bit over to you, Jeannie. You can finish off the last few slides.
All righty.
Sounds good.
Yeah. In the report, which you have a copy of, as we had sort of gotten an okay from you on a few months ago, we're relying on the an earlier traffic analysis, and really essentially for two reasons. One is that our in the pandemic, our traffic counts are unusually low, and as formal policy, we're moving more to a hybrid work mode anyway. And secondly, the traffic analysis that was done back in 2006 assumed that we would have much more development than we actually have realized to date. So we're really well within the the projections that were made back then. The other thing that you allowed us to do is rely on an old economic study. So that information is to some degree, included in this plan as well. But we did update some of the economic impact data, obviously to reflect 2021 information that we have. And the conceptual stormwater management plan is very similar to that which was presented 7 years ago. Our engineer from Sims-Maney SMMA will go through some of those details a little bit later in this presentation. Next slide, please. So this really, it just goes into a little bit more detail about what the Dean has said. We've built over 150,000 square feet, and we've demoed over 40. So our net development to date, again, from 1999 to 2021 has only been a bit over 110,000 square feet. And these really go through the projects that we have constructed. Many of these are expansions. Some of them are, one of the biggest obviously was the New England Regional Biosafety Lab. The campus center was a renovation and expansion. We built the Barber Wildlife Clinic. You see that, those pictures are there. And the Swine 2 expansion, which we'll talk about a little bit later. That's second from the bottom is shown. It's really, it's a fairly modest pole barn construction, but it was occupied by Mass General Hospital for many years. Next slide, please. These are more recent projects, which we mentioned: the solar arrays, the sports medicine complex, which is that lower building on the right. You see the new hospital entry, middle picture. And space renovations that are not so apparent because their internal renovations were the Peabody Lab and offices and the multipurpose teaching and simulation lab. Next slide. So this plan really doesn't change the planning envelopes. This overall square footages that you approved in the last 3 master plans really remain the same, and we're continuing to show some of the same projects. But what we've done is we've reallocated some space among the categories, and we've removed some facilities and then proposed other ones. Next slide. So what this is trying to show is the numerical details. So we're staying within that 256, 850 development square feet, but you'll see that there's, in this plan, there's over 207,000 square feet of academic and hospital space. The number in parentheses, the 83,600, is what was in the last plan, the 2014 plan. So there's a significant increase, over 120,000 square foot increase of space allocated to that particular category. And animal facilities, similarly, it goes in the opposite direction, but we're now proposing 20,000 square feet of animal facilities. We had almost 32,000 before, so that's obviously a decrease. There's a decrease in special projects, a little bit of a decrease in research and general education, largely because the hospital is will include some of the clinical teaching spaces. So that's a reallocation there. And then the next slide, please. We are decreasing also student residences and recreation. And in part, we removed a recreation building that was proposed on the last couple of plans, partially because we believe that with the development in the neighborhood, it's not really going to be needed at this time. And we're just modestly gone up with mostly buildings and ground storage area. The other significant change is that we are increasing the proposed square footage that we're going to demolish, and it's now at over, it's almost 107,000 square feet. So it's an increase of 56,500. So there'll be more of the, in general, what you'll see reflected in the plans is removing a vacant building, removing a lot of the small, inefficient residences, and doing some centralization of facilities. Again, the dean has gone over these to some degree, and what they are. There's this additional increase of square feet to the small animal hospital and the central academic campus, the primary healthcare teaching center, which you mentioned, and two projects which our carbon neutral consultants have recommended were geothermal wells on the Phelps Field and a potential added solar array. So those are included in the plan as well. And then as part of the demolition that I mentioned, the demolition square footage, the recreation center, building 18, which was that big vacant building in the center of the campus, and the Westboro equine exercise facility have been removed from the plan. So again, this is just highlighting the changes from 2014. You see the big increased area adjacent to the hospital complex. You'll see that, again, this is, again, a little bit of an enlarged picture of what the dean has already shown you. The primary healthcare teaching center to the east on the corner of Willard and Westboro Road. There's an expansion in the low hospital area. And you'll see that building, there is a research.
Low education center, Jeannie.
Sorry, low education center. There is a larger research building, which is over on the left-hand side of the screen. And you'll see that building 18 is just shown as a very, it's represented as being as being demolished. Next slide, please. So these just, again, it goes over the details of, in this plan, that West Office building, which is the Spay Clinic surgery ward expansion and faculty offices, would be over 75,000 square feet. The teaching expansion, again, part of that central small animal hospital, would be 37,500, and then the primary healthcare teaching center would be 25,000. So those are the numbers. Again, they're what we are estimating at this point. I'm sure that as we get into the specific project design, there'll be some modifications, but again, we will stay within those planning envelopes. Next slide. So again, the geo-exchange fields, we're showing them under Phelps Field and a paddock, which is near the research quad. There would be, this is not really a master plan issue, but there would be heat loops. So there'd be a lot of sort of work in HVAC infrastructure included in these plans, as well as improvements to what the facilities department and engineering department call our linear assets. So we would need to, you know, we really have to do an electrical, a campus electrical master plan, because there'll be increased demands on power, and we will need to upgrade to accomplish these carbon neutral goals. And then the other project, which is significant, potentially significant, is the notion of putting a structured parking facility near our wildlife clinic. And we were thinking about including a third solar array in that location. So again, that's sort of between our wildlife clinic and the existing Knoll solar array. Again, these in yellow show the changes between what we had in our previous plan. The low expansion is increased from, I think, 7,000 up to now over 30,000. We're still thinking of a new center for animals, but it would be incorporated in one of these other buildings. We're still, this again has been carried through from other plans, so this is a similarity. The Barber addition would still be at 3,000 square feet. And for animal facilities, we would be staying within our existing square footage or reducing the existing footprints, which we can talk about a little bit later. Other proposed square footages under the category of special projects, the only one remaining that we are again continuing and carrying through is a new mammals cage. So that hasn't changed. And then for research and general education, we are proposing a new building 19, but increasing the footprint from 12,000 to this 38,700. And in fact, also not proposing a second research building in that area. So again, it would be, there would be one larger research building, but in our research quad area. Okay. The others, the research center, as I mentioned, is no longer planned. There's a
The recreation center, Jean.
Yeah, sorry, the recreation center is no longer planned. And we don't propose any additional construction in this category. The buildings and grounds garage has a slightly expanded footprint. And as I mentioned earlier, we are contemplating an additional 56,500 in demo of the older or inefficient or vacant buildings. Now all of what we've spoken about really is the academic campus. For the Grafton Science Park, we are continuing with the plans that we've shown in the past. The one we showed with the RBL in it and 3 buildings in phase 1 is the same as in 14. Phase 2 is again the same, but it differs in that we are proposing to incorporate the Swine 1 facility area into what would be the park. And if you go to the next slide, please. This lower circle shows the phase 2 area of Grafton Science Park, and you see that highlighted sort of S-shaped area, and that is where Swine 1 is, and we're no longer using it. We're going to demo it, and we hope to fold that acreage into that Grafton Science Park acreage for development, commercial development.
Can you point to that, Jean?
Chris is doing it. Yeah, right there. Good. Thank you, Chris. And again, we, the total square feet is so dependent on the market for these particular categories of development over the next 20 years. But what we're envisioning are offices, laboratories, manufacturing, R&D, technical assembly, anything that's envisioned by zoning or permitted by zoning would be considered. Do you want to speak to that a little bit, Joe, about the sweet spot of animal?
I don't think I need to enlarge on it. We're open to the full breadth of what is permitted. Of course, we would love to have life sciences companies in there that our faculty could collaborate with, students could have summer internships with, and et cetera. But the town of Grafton has more broadly zoned it, and we know that you've been very patient waiting for something to happen there, and we're open to the currently broader permitted uses in Grafton Science Park to make something happen for economic development.
Well said, Joe. And so this slide just kind of is a bit of a history of what infrastructure we have in place already. We have the roadway, water, sewer, redundant power, natural gas now in phase 1. And as you know, the town and Tufts partnered to secure the funding and state grants for that work, for the road construction and the water loop and extension of the sewer line. Next slide, please. So what we're continuing to do is we're actively marketing to corporate prospects. We are working with JLL, the commercial broker. Where a new development is, we are trying to partner work with Mass Development, and then with these other kind of business associations and state economic development associations, which we've collaborated with in the past. That's Mass Medic, Mass Bio, and Mass Econ. And as you know, the site is a 43D designated site and is part of a Grafton, which is a Platinum Bio ready community. Next slide. And this is where I'd like to turn it over to Mark Borenstein, who will kind of give you some of the details of how the plan, as we've designed it, is, complies with the zoning, underlying zoning and the overlay districts and with the dimensional regulations. So Mark.
Thanks, Jean. Can folks hear me? Just want to make sure.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. So as Jean and Dean Cribb said, my name is Mark Borenstein. I'm an attorney at the law firm of Bowditch and Dewey. And I'll be reviewing generally the zoning requirements for the campus overlay district. As I'm sure the board is aware, the property is primarily zoned office light industrial district. A small portion of the property is in the residential R40 district, but primarily office light industrial. And the portion in that district is overlaid by the campus development overlay district, which is why we're submitting this master plan to you. The campus development overlay district is subject to section 9 of the zoning bylaw, which specifies certain permissibility of uses, design, and dimensional requirements. So first off, in terms of permitted uses, section 9.4 of the zoning bylaw specifies certain uses that are permitted in the campus development overlay district. So the first is educational uses, so classrooms, laboratories, buildings, and facilities associated with educational uses. Those are all permitted as of right. Research, development, manufacturing in certain fields of science, research and development in the field of computer technology, commercial facilities that are reasonably necessary as accessory to those particular uses are permitted, and facilities and other types of uses are all permitted as of right in the campus development overlay district. So all of the uses that Gina has been reviewing and Dean Cribb have been discussing are all permitted as of right, and any of the proposed uses would fit within those categories. In addition to that, the section 9.5 of the zoning bylaw specifies certain design criteria and guidelines. The proposed master plan as amended would comply with these particular requirements. Just to briefly summarize, and this is included in the materials, but the campus has a very unified design in that it incorporates shared parking, sidewalks, landscaping, while also respecting the campus's historic nature and also the very pastoral qualities of the property. Open spaces have been integrated into the campus design, and very environmentally significant features have been preserved. Best management practices in terms of stormwater and drainage have been implemented, and I believe Aaron will be speaking to that later. All new utilities will be underground. In addition, the master plan and the development therein would comply with all the dimensional requirements. So in terms of the setback and height requirements, or the zoning bylaw allows for relief to be sought with respect to height. If for whatever reason the development required a relief, Tufts would seek that, but it's anticipated that would comply with all setback and height requirements. The floor area ratio is allowed up to 0.35 and currently stands at 0.07. The percentage of coverage in terms of open space is not allowed to exceed 25% and currently stands at 71 to 87%. So quite a lot of open space on the property in terms of the 1,000 square foot radius requirements. The plan has sought to mitigate any type of adverse negative effects in terms of the development. And again, Aaron will speak to that more. The plan will ensure that the proposed development is compatible with the budding properties by maintaining those heavily forested buffers around the campus. The proposed facilities will satisfy the transportation needs of the development. Gene mentioned that Cummings is relying on the 2006 traffic study, and that study provides for minor modifications that would need to be reviewed in terms of making sure that any traffic impacts are addressed. All proposed ways would comply with subdivision rules and regulations. Again, there's ample off-street parking on site based on Cummings's calculations. I believe, Gene, you do want to speak with the town, just have a conversation about the current off-street parking requirements as well, and possibly there, given, as Gene said, that the move to a more hybrid approach, there might be an opportunity to revisit those ratios and the required number of parking spaces, just to ensure that Cummings doesn't have too much unnecessary impervious surfaces at the property. Finally, and pretty significantly, the net benefits of the town are pretty significant in terms of this development. The master plan will result, and this is based on the 2006 Nexus Associates analysis, but again, as Gene said, it's been updated with particular figures to the extent that they can be provided for 2021. It's estimated the development will result in over 900 jobs, general output of approximately over $460 million, $195 million in terms of disposable personal income over 7 years. Cummings currently employs 499 employees with an annual payroll of over $30 million. There's currently annual property taxes in terms of contributions in over $100,000, but with that additional development, and you see here on the slide, 185 million to 247 million could generate somewhere between 3.2 and 4.2 million in property tax revenue. So there's quite an upside in terms of the potential for this development. In addition to that, Chris, if you go to the next slide, Cummings continues to be a source of incubation for these biotechnology companies. The numbers have been increasing. In 2014, there were 22 companies. Now there are 33 companies. So that speaks to the progress and the potential in terms of ongoing collaborations between Cummings and some of these companies. That's all I have in terms of the compliance with the zoning requirements, but I would like just to point out, just from a technical perspective, the master plan is valid in terms of the amendment for 7 years. The amendment technically was set to expire late last year. Cummings would respectfully request that the planning board extend the validity of the amendment until the next meeting or whenever the board sees fit to approve this amendment to the master plan. So I just ask for that in terms of a technical request. And I think with that, I turn it over to Erin to speak to the stormwater and drainage.
Thank you very much. So my name is Erin Prostilio. I'm a civil engineer with SMA. I find stormwater management design interesting and exciting, but I'm going to spare you tonight of the details that was submitted in the master plan and just review some of the highlights and the takeaways from, again, what was submitted to you. The main highlights from this master plan update is that it's consistent with previous filings on master plans. The modeling methodology, the proposed site analysis, and the recommendations are still the same. Most notably, this master plan I find most exciting actually is consistent with Grafton's 2021 stormwater management regulations, which I believe were updated about this time last year. So if you go, I think we're ahead a little bit. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so just briefly going through the modeling that was submitted, its conceptual level is campus-wide model. It incorporates both projects completed since 2014 and also the proposed components of this master plan. The campus remains divided into 3 main sub-watersheds: Axtell, Assabet, and the Southeast Wetlands. If you flip to the next slide, here's an image of the campus kind of chopped up into subcatchments. Much of the campus drains to Axtell, but if you'll see the portion labeled P9 on the upper right drains to Assabet, and the portion labeled P10 drains to the Southeast Wetlands. Everything else drains to Axtell. So if you go to the next slide. In section 4 of the report, all of the recommendations were outlined, including strategies to reduce impervious cover, soil disturbances, employing environmentally sensitive site design, recommends use of structural and non-structural LID best management practices to accomplish enhanced treatment and water quality for stormwater runoff. It also recommends implementing source controls and pollution prevention to reduce the generation of runoff. Ultimately, more detailed, like it says on the bottom, more detailed analysis of design and review of individual projects proceeding from master plan to actual design is needed. Next slide. These are some images of some BMPs. These recommendations that were presented are consistent with the revisions to the Grafton Stormwater Management Regulations. They require higher level of water quality. Reducing impervious surfaces will inherently reduce the need for BMPs. Low impact development will be implemented wherever feasible and will disconnect stormwater, which makes stormwater BMPs smaller, more efficient at removing pollutants. And infiltration of stormwater remains a top strategy to mitigate impacts of development while achieving these enhanced water quality goals. That is all I have for you on stormwater. And I believe that concludes the presentation. Jean, did you have any closing remarks?
I just wanted to thank the board for their time tonight and ask if you had any questions for our team.
Bob.
Yeah. I'm interested. An awful lot has happened just next to you over on Pine Street in all since the last time we looked at this. And I'm just interested in whatever your response to it is, how that's going to influence, talk to us about your relationship to that.
Well, Dean, do you want to go ahead, or Joe, or should I jump in?
Well, I can say a few words, and I mean, what we expect is that a number of our students and probably some of our staff will take advantage of that development. We have, on behalf of the developers, we've surveyed and provided them information about what people want from our in our community. I think there's going to be some commercial development, as I understand it, too, on the main floor, which we have particular interest if there happen to be things like increased childcare and pet care and those sorts of things in their neighborhood. That would be really helpful for us because we have a lot of demand for that. But we just see that as a positive. And in terms of things like the Grafton Science Park, having that kind of residential space available there as well, I mean, I think we see all that as positive.
You will see an increase in traffic in the area. How much so, I don't think anyone can guess at this point.
No, and I don't know which the directions will be. I mean, we don't do that. We worry about, or at least I do anyway, about the traffic on 30 anyway, going through our school. And, if you look at a lot of what we're doing is we're kind of keeping majority of the development on one side so that we try to reduce how much students in particular need to cross that road. So if we get a lot more traffic from that way going down into Westboro, that might be a concern, but I suspect a lot of that traffic will go up to the 20 and up to 9, and not necessarily so much in front of us, but we'll see, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And there'll be people who won't be driving. We're hoping that people will be living there and availing themselves of the train.
Yes, or just walking over to work on our campus.
Precisely.
One of the questions in the survey that we did in the fall for the developer of Pine Street was, if we had a shuttle, would you use it? That is a shuttle between the campus and the Pine Street development. And, almost, I believe 2/3 of the people said, yeah, if we lived there, we would, jump on the shuttle. That includes both all the time and if the weather is bad, so I can honestly see a decrease in traffic from the Cummings community if a good portion of the students live in that development. And they're putting in a number of amenities that are exactly what our students were, prefer and like to see. So that was also a nice thing.
The place is almost going to run itself.
Okay.
Yep. Anything else from the board? Any other questions, comments?
I had one bit. Dave, can you hear me?
Prabhu, yeah.
Thank you, sir. One thing I was noticing was you're reducing the recreation facility, the overall square footage, however you name it. You're not reducing the number of students. I know, Jean, you had mentioned that you're sort of I think you said that trending towards the hybrid model My request is this, and I don't know how it's going to fare out. We as Grafton, we don't have any recreation facility outside of our high school or middle school, nothing. We pay thousands of dollars to Westboro, private facilities, Shrewsbury, and other places. Your students are not going anywhere. If they are going to be in the vicinity, is there an opportunity to continue looking at retaining or even enhancing the recreation facility in some partnership mode? It is a very viable project. We keep talking about it, and I keep bringing it up in various conversations. We are seeing a reduction in the recreation facility. I'm assuming recreation being indoor recreation facilities like volleyball, badminton, you name it, right? Something of that kind.
So can I just clarify what you're asking? So, I mean, you know, right now we just have a small gym inside one of our buildings, but you're suggesting that perhaps there could be a larger recreational development that went beyond what we might think of for the school, that was then also shared with the community. I'm going to maybe deflect that one to Joe, or maybe to Nick, who might know better than I on the zoning requirements. But that's the kind of thing that could potentially go into the Grafton Science Park, is it not? If we wanted to look at something like that was sort of, you know, a commercial operation, if you will, but then accessible to our students. And I will say that, you know, we have had to, on occasion, and it's closed right now, close the gym facility in the pandemic. And of course, they don't, you know, they want access to it. So there's definitely interest and demand. I don't think the Pine Street operation has anything significant recreation wise in it, does it? I don't recall anything, but
yes.
What's it got in there, Scott?
I thought they were adding a gym facility, at least to the occupants of the apartment.
The occupants,
it'll be shared with the public.
Right. I think it's just as like an amenity in an apartment, so that the residents would have like a gym
and a dog walking area, which we're happy about because it'll reduce the pressure on our campus of non-patient dogs.
Yeah, and so I think there's you know, that is something that there is, you know, I think potential location for it. I have no idea on the economics of it, but it's definitely worth thinking about.
Thank you.
Sir, I would also add that through COVID, when the gym has been closed, we've opened the basketball courts and the tennis courts, and they've also been playing out in the field, whatever that Frisbee game is, led by Eric. They've gotten a lot of use out of the outdoor facilities that we have in Phelps Field.
Anything else? It's been pretty interesting. It's always interesting to see what how things have progressed, and in some cases changed over the years. And we've come a long way since my first contact with the Tufts campus back in the 80s.
Okay. So, we go back to the beginning with Jules Mailloux and him being introduced as Dr. Gene Mayer.
Yes. Dean Cribb, I'm wondering if you want to briefly mention the fork in the road we're at in terms of decision-making on our Swine Unit 2 facility?
Sure. So there is a the Swine Unit 2 that Gene mentioned too as well. It's in that Grafton Science Park type area. It's not formally part of the Grafton Science Park. And we have been running a swine production unit in there for a number of years. And that building, the expansion was actually done by MGH, and they were in there for, I think, close to 10 years, Joe, is that right? Close to 10 years. Right. And then they decided to move on to other activities. And Gene mentioned that we've closed our swine unit 1, and so we've relocated our swine to swine unit 2. But the reality is that maintaining square footage at the rate that is required within the university system to maintain a building like that makes it hard to do that in an economically sustainable way. So we've made the decision to ourselves move out of that swine production operation, but we've got 2 or 3 companies that are interested in buying or looking at buying the facility and turning that into a commercial operation, which we would then be able to roll into the science park as part of the commercial development there, and then would potentially be paying taxes to the town. So we've sort of made the decision to, as I say, stop our unit. We received permission from the university to sell the building. It would still be a ground lease with the university, but that would be another step towards sort of making the vision of the Grafton Science Park reality. Georgia, you can add any more color to that if you want, but I think that's the key components of that. So we're hoping for decisions actually fairly shortly as we move forward.
We're speaking to life science companies about their potential need for that building, some of whom have been our pig sale clients that we've serviced in the past, and they might want to take it over and run it for themselves.
I'm also aware that, and this is a little off topic, but I understand that the technical review of the report isn't completed yet. So we would, Chris, I believe, need an extension, at least for another 2 weeks.
Yeah, the town's technical review.
Yeah, the town's technical review.
Yeah, so of the hearing, correct?
Yeah,
so the
continuation here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So unless there is something else, I think I just heard the applicant request a continuation to January 24th, and it would then be appropriate for the board to entertain a motion to that grant the client's request.
This is a public hearing, so are we sure we don't have anybody who wants to make input? I haven't seen anything.
Yes, well, I don't see anybody in the Zoom attendee list, so any public comment would have to come from one of the panelists that we see on the screen in front of us.
Okay. Okay, I move to grant the applicant's request to continue the hearing until January 24th at 7:30.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion of the motion? Hearing none, we'll put this to a vote. Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
And Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried. We will see you in 2 weeks. Anxiously awaiting our technical review, and not anticipating any problems, of course, but we want to make sure that all the paperwork is in order. I see a hand raised from Mr. Borenstein.
Yeah, this is just a technicality. Just want to include in terms of the motion for the continuance that the master plan amendment is also continued until that meeting, just because technically it did expire in 2021. So I want to make sure that we're still in compliance with the zoning bylaw.
Move to add that to what we just voted.
Second.
Seconder agrees. Okay. And should I take another just to dot the i's? Let's yeah, that's a separate motion from the motion to continue. Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. So the existing plan remains in force through the completion of this process on the new plan. And thank you all for spending the time with us this evening. And we look forward to seeing you once again and in the future as the plans continue to develop.
Thank you to the board.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for your presentation. I think we'll be able to steer people back to it. Hopefully, I guess we'll have it on the website so that as we go along, people can get a better sense of what the situation over there is and what's happening. So anyway, thanks very much. Been seeing Gene for just a little while now on this. Okay, I move we adjourn.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Second.
I believe I heard a motion and a second that this
You
meeting
did.
be adjourned. Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
and Mr. Robbins votes aye. The motion carried unanimously. We are adjourned.